summiting all 82 peaks over 4,000 meters, and in a mind-blowing 19 days.
And today, we're going to unpack the gear secrets behind this incredible feat. We're diving into Jornet's own accounts to see what he packed. And let me tell you, some of his choices might surprise you.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of what he brought, I'm curious about his overall philosophy when it comes to gear. It can't just be about packing every high-tech gadget, right?
You're absolutely right. Jornet's approach is incredibly minimalist, especially considering the magnitude of this challenge. He emphasizes deep familiarity with your equipment over simply having the latest and greatest. For him, it's about knowing how to use each piece effectively in any situation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty impressive to think about applying that to something as demanding as running across the Alps. So let's get into specifics. What about shoes? You'd think he'd need heavy-duty mountaineering boots for something like this.
You'd think so. But surprisingly, Jornet opted for 3 pairs of Tamir 2 shoes. And those are trail running shoes.
Trail runners?
Yeah.
Isn't that risky in such extreme terrain?
There are definitely trade-offs. Jornet himself acknowledges the need for strong ankles and a very precise ice climbing technique with this type of footwear. They don't offer the same level of ankle support or rigidity as traditional mountaineering boots, but the lightweight design allows for greater agility and speed, which was clearly a priority for him.
So lighter and faster, but potentially less stable. Did he use the same shoes for the entire journey?
He actually swapped them out mid-journey. He used waterproof pairs for specific sections and non-waterproof ones for others. This constant adaptation to the changing terrain and conditions highlights another key aspect of his approach.
That's fascinating. It's like he's constantly fine-tuning his setup for optimal performance. And speaking of adapting, let's move on to clothing. What did he wear to conquer those alpine conditions?
His clothing list reflects that same minimalist approach. Merino wool base layers, a mid-layer jacket, a windbreaker, a rain jacket, and a down jacket. All lightweight and versatile.
Seems pretty straightforward. Anything unexpected on that list?
A few things stand out. He packed multiple pairs of climbing gloves, not just for warmth, but specifically to protect his hands from that constant abrasion of rock. That's a level of detail you might not think about until you're actually out there.
That makes sense. What about other protective gear? I imagine safety equipment is crucial for a challenge like this.
Absolutely. He carried the essentials, a helmet, a harness, and even an ice screw for those particularly icy sections. Interestingly, he only used one ice axe at a time, choosing between a carbon axe for ice and rock or a Grivel Ghost Tech, depending on the terrain. Again, this highlights his focus on efficiency and adapting to the immediate needs of the environment.
So 2 axes, but only using one at a time. It's all about minimizing weight while still being prepared, right? What about crampons?
He had those as well, but with a unique twist. He used a customized setup, mixing and matching brands to achieve the best possible fit with his trail running shoes. It shows how much thought went into every detail of his gear.
That's incredible. It sounds like he's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with a minimalist setup. And what about those spike chains I saw mentioned? How are those different from crampons?
Yes. For certain peaks, like Bernina and Gran Paradiso, he opted for spike chains instead of traditional crampons. These are lighter and more flexible, providing better traction on specific types of terrain, especially the snow-covered glaciers he encountered.
So he's not just being minimalist for the sake of it. He's strategically choosing lighter options when they provide a performance advantage.
Exactly. He also mentioned using a rope and climbing gear like cams and even an Abalakov hook for certain technical sections. An Abalakov hook is basically a type of ice anchor you create by drilling into the ice.
Okay, I'm starting to get a real sense of how carefully curated his gear selection was. But even with a minimalist approach, this all sounds like a lot to carry. How did he manage navigation and communication with all this gear?
For those aspects, he relied on technology. He had a headlamp, a tracking device, a GoPro, and even used his phone for maps, all powered by a simple power bank and cable. Plus, his Coros Vertex watch helped him track his progress and vital stats.
And of course, some cash for those mountain huts along the way. I love the image of him refueling and restocking as he goes, embracing the self-sufficiency of this challenge.
It really paints a picture of his journey, doesn't it? And speaking of refueling, his hydration system was as simple as it gets, just 2 soft flasks.
No fancy hydration packs, that's pretty hardcore. And what about food? How do you fuel such an intense undertaking?
He doesn't delve too deeply into the specifics of what food he packed. Most likely he relied on resupplying at mountain huts and possibly even foraging along the way.
So all this gear, shoes, clothing, climbing equipment, tech, food, hydration, all of this fit into a 25 to 30 liter backpack.
It did. That's about the size of a standard day pack. It's a testament to his packing skills and his commitment to traveling light.
And get this, he even had a whole separate bike setup.
You're right. He used a road bike for those long stretches between mountain ranges, covering vast distances quickly and efficiently.
So that's a road bike, shoes, helmet clothes, and another Chorus watch. This time, a Dura model. It's amazing how much planning went into every aspect of this journey.
It really is. And now for the part that blew my mind. All this gear, including food and water, typically weighed between 4 and 7 kilos.
That's lighter than my work bag. And with that much physical exertion, he must have been consuming a ton of calories.
He relied on simple, high-calorie foods like avocado sandwiches and homemade bean cream. On average, he was taking in a staggering 8,300 calories per day.
I'm curious about his recovery drinks. Was it the usual protein shake routine?
He took a more natural route, opting for oregano infusions with coconut oil and beetroot, ginger, and turmeric smoothie. Quite an interesting approach, right?
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from shoes and clothing to technical gear and even a bike setup. What stands out to you about Jornet's gear choices?
What strikes me is the incredible level of intentionality behind every single item. He didn't just grab whatever was available, he meticulously chose each piece based on a deep understanding of his own needs and the demands of the mountains.
It really does highlight his philosophy. It's not just about being minimalist, it's about being deeply connected to your gear and using it as an extension of your own abilities.
Exactly, and this deep understanding allows him to adapt and adjust his approach on the fly, constantly optimizing for efficiency and performance. Remember how he swapped out shoes depending on the terrain? That wasn't just about comfort, it was about maximizing his effectiveness for each stage of the journey.